This question talks about six students John, Steve, Hans, Brown, Peter, and Eddie who took an exam with maximum marks as 100. All of them scored different marks and none of them scored 0 marks. Some information is given about some information is given about the marks scored by them. We'll try to figure out who scored how many marks. We'll represent these names people with their initials: John with J, Steve with S, Hans with H, Brown with B, Peter with P, and Eddie with E. Now, statement 1 says that the marks scored by each student except Brown was the squares of a natural number. That means John's score was a square, Steve's score was a square, Hans' score was a square, Brown was not a square, Peter's score was a square, and Eddie's score was also a square. Statement 3 says that the marks scored by Brown, Peter, and Eddie were the cubes of natural numbers. That means Brown's score was a cube, Peter's score was a cube, and Eddie's score was a cube. Now, we see that the score of Peter and Eddie as a square of a natural number is also a cube of a natural number. We know that the maximum marks is 100, and below 100 there are only two possible numbers which are squares and cubes of a natural number. The numbers are 1 and 64. So the possible score for Peter and Eddie are 1 and 64. Among Peter and Eddie, one of them must have scored a score as 1, the other must have scored a score of 64. Now, from statement 4, it says that the product of the marks scored by John and Peter was an odd natural number. John and Peter, the product of their scores is an odd natural number. The product of two natural numbers can be odd only when the two numbers itself are odd. That means Peter must have scored an odd natural number. So the option of 64 is ruled out. So the score of Peter must be 1 and the score of Eddie must be 64. For John's score, we know that it should be an odd natural number. Now, for Brown, we know that it is again a cube. So since below 100 there are only 4 possible cubes are there. They are 1, 8, 27 and 64. 1 and 64 are already the scores of Peter and Eddie respectively. So the options left for Brown are 8 and 27. Now, from statement 2, it says that the marks of scored by John was equal to the sum of the marks scored by two other students in the group. And statement 5 says that the absolute difference between the marks scored by Eddie and Steve, that is either E minus S or S minus E, should be was equal to the marks scored by one of the other students except these two in the group. We have the score of Eddie, but we don't have the score of Steve. So Eddie's score is 64 minus S, or S minus 64. It should be a score of some other student. That means it could be a score of John, could be Hans, could be Brown, could be Peter. Now, what all possible options are there for Steve? We know that the score of Steve is a square. It cannot be 1, it cannot be 64. So the possible values are, it could be 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 81 or 100. These are 8 possible values what Steve could have scored. Now if I start subtracting it from Eddie's score or the other way, I see the difference as absolute difference as 60, 55, 48, 39, 28, 15, 17 and 36. We see that 60 is neither a square nor a cube, 55 is neither a square nor a cube. Same is true with 48, 39, 28, 15 and 17. We see that 36 is the only number which is a square. So 36 cannot be the score of a score of Brown. Also, the score of John is an odd square. So 36 cannot be the score of John. The only possibility of 36 score is of Hans. So Hans must have scored 36 and Steve must have scored 100 because 100 minus 64 gave us 36. So his score must have been 100. Now, what are the possibilities for the score of John? The possibilities are 9, 25, 49 and 81. And from statement 2 we know that John's score is equal to the score of two other students. Can 9 be a sum of two other scores? Yes, it can be a sum of 8 and 1. Can 25 be a sum? No, 25 can never be a sum of any two scores. 49, it's again not possible because we have 27, 36, no other number would add up to 49. 81, again 64, no number would add up to 81, 1, 27, 8, 36, none of the scores would add up to 81. So the only possibility is that John's score must have been 9 and it should have been a sum of 8 and 1. That means Brown's score must have been 8. We have all the 6 scores with us. Now we'll move forward for answering the questions. The question is the marks scored by John was equal to the sum of marks scored by John's score is a sum of the score by Brown and Peter. That is option C. The ratio of marks scored by two students in the group was 1:4. Who out of the two scored lesser marks? 1:4 ratio is possible in which case? It is possible only in the case of John and Hans, that is 9 and 36, and we know that John scored lesser marks. So the answer is John, that is option B. Who scored the lowest marks? We know that Peter scored 1 and which is the lowest score. So the answer is option D. Next, what was the sum of the marks scored by Hans and Brown? Hans scored 36, Brown scored 8. So the total is 44. The possible option is option D. Thank you.